So when it comes to pronunciation, it's not just about sounding like a native speaker. It's actually more about having people to be able to understand what you're saying. You could have perfect grammar, perfect wording, but if your pronunciation isn't right, it can make it so sometimes people won't understand what you're saying. Like if I said, "Whoa, chang chang, chu shui jiao." Don't really know what I'm saying, right? When what I was trying to say was, 我常常吃水饺. Now here's the thing, when I said it, my grammar was perfect. The wording was perfect. But because the pronunciation was off, and the tones were off, you had no idea what I was saying. Now, English may not have tones like Chinese does, but it does have specific vowel sounds and specific consonant sounds. And if you blend those sounds together or they're not clear, then it makes it really hard to understand what you're saying. Just like if I use the wrong tones in Chinese. And it's because of that in this next package, we're going to have an emphasis on pronunciation. So in the package, there's going to be a lot of drills and practices that will allow you to develop the mouth strength and the muscle memory that's needed to make the right sound every time. Now, the first part of getting good pronunciation is first being able to recognize sounds. And what these drills will do is you'll first listen to what I'm saying in a specific practice. Listen to what I'm like a specific word or a phrase or a sentence, and then pause it. And then record yourself saying that exact same word, sentence, or phrase. Then listen to between the two and see what's different. Once you hear what's different, try and mimic it. Try and mimic it the way that I say it. If you do that, you'll train your ear. And once your ear is able to distinguish those different sounds, the faster you'll be able to improve at developing native-like pronunciation. Now, with that being said, it's so important that you remember to do this practice right. Don't just listen to the recording and record yourself and then hear the two and move on to the next one. You need to really listen. Listen for those tiny, subtle differences. That's the only way you're going to be able to train your ear. Because if you just kind of go through the motions, you won't be able to pick up those small details, which means you won't be able to mimic those small details, which means you can't improve your pronunciation. And that's the whole point, is you got to be able to recognize before you're able to mimic. Now, what happens if you can hear the difference between my recording and your recording, but no matter how hard you try, you can't say it the way that I'm saying it? What do you do then? If you can't replicate a sound, here's something that will help. Pay attention to what my lips are doing. Pay attention to what my teeth are doing, or what my tongue is doing, or what my throat is doing. If you look at those little tiny subtle movements, that'll help you be able to mimic. Now, the next thing to keep in mind is absolutely crucial. There are going to be some sounds that even if you listen to the recording of me and yourself, and you try and look at everything that my mouth is doing and that my throat is doing, you still won't be able to replicate that sound. When you get to that point, you need to remember, this isn't because you're bad at learning languages and that you'll never learn English. What this means is that your mouth or your throat isn't strong enough yet, and that it needs to develop strength first. A great example of this was when I was first learning Chinese. I could not make the noise yu to save my life. Every time I tried to make that noise, it sounded like you, and I just tried and I tried for months and months and I couldn't do it. And people would correct me. They'd be like, you, and I'd be like, you, and I couldn't do it. Until finally, after practicing for a couple of months, my mouth was strong enough to stick out and do the yu noise. Now, when I finally started to be able to make that noise, I noticed that every time, I would speak Chinese all day, my lips right here would be really sore because it wasn't used to sticking out like that to make the yu noise. And so the same thing's going to happen when you learn English. There are going to be some noises that don't exist in Chinese, just like yu doesn't exist in English. And your mouth is not used to making those noises. And because of that, it's going to take some time for your mouth to be able to adjust and build the strength to actually pronounce that sound. So while you're going through these practices and you're having a hard time replicating a sound, just remember that it isn't because you're bad at English. It's just that your mouth isn't strong enough yet, and that it'll take some time. But if you stay consistent with it, and if you keep that in mind to help you stay with it and keep practicing, you will eventually make the sound. And let me tell you, it's a really cool feeling when you do it. So when it comes to mastering pronunciation, the first step is 1, listening to the way you say something and listening to the way a native speaker says that same thing, finding the difference and adjusting yourself to sound more like the native speaker. Now, the second part is if you can't adjust yourself to sound more like the native speaker, but you can hear the difference, what you can do is pay attention to what their mouth is doing, what the tongue is doing, what the teeth are doing, what the lips are doing, and try and kind of mimic what they're doing. Now, if that doesn't work, just keep in mind that this is probably because your mouth isn't strong enough yet. It doesn't mean that it never will be. It just means that it isn't right now, and it'll take some time. And if you do that and stick with it, you'll be able to develop the mouth strength that's necessary. Now, if you keep these key concepts in mind, it'll allow your pronunciation to improve dramatically, which is really important because it'll allow people to be able to understand you better. And that'll just lead to you learning the language much more efficiently and much faster.